Deep beneath the Martian ice caps, where no human was supposed to survive, archaeologist Dr. Sarah Chen made a discovery that would rewrite everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. What she found wasn't just another relic from Mars' dead past, it was proof that Earth's children had been among the stars long before they ever dreamed of leaving their home world. The ancient Starship's AI had been waiting in the darkness for over 3,000 years, its final words echoing through the empty corridors. "I've been without fuel for centuries, but I never stopped believing you would return." But Sarah wasn't just any human. She was the descendant of the ship's original crew, carrying genetic markers that would awaken technologies beyond imagination. As the AI systems flickered back to life, it delivered a message that chilled her to the bone: the enemy that destroyed our civilization is coming back. And, this time, they're bringing friends. What Sarah doesn't know is that her discovery has already been detected across the galaxy. Ancient enemies are stirring, convinced that humanity died out long ago. They're about to learn that humans don't just survive, they evolve, adapt, and come back stronger than ever. The greatest adventure in human history is about to begin, and it starts with 3 words that will echo across the stars: "Welcome home, daughter." The wind on Mars never stopped howling, but Dr. Sarah Chen had learned to ignore it years ago. She knelt in the excavation pit, her environmental suit protecting her from the -60-degree temperature, and carefully brushed away centuries of accumulated dust from what looked like carved metal. Her team had been working this site for 3 months, following electromagnetic readings that suggested something large and artificial lay buried beneath the polar ice cap. "Sarah, you need to see this," called Dr. Marcus Webb, her geological specialist, from 20 meters away. His voice crackled through the communication system built into their helmets. "The ice here isn't natural. It's been artificially preserved, and it's much older than anything we've found on Mars before." Sarah stood up, her knees protesting after hours of careful excavation work. At 35, she was one of the youngest lead archaeologists ever to head a Mars expedition, but her reputation for finding the impossible had earned her this opportunity. The Martian Archaeological Consortium had given her unlimited funding and resources after her discovery of the underground cities near Olympus Mons. Those cities had proven that Mars once supported an advanced civilization, but they had been empty for thousands of years, with no clues about what happened to their builders. She walked over to Webb's position, where he was using a thermal scanner on what appeared to be a massive wall of ice. The readings on his device made her breath catch in her throat. The ice was at least 3,000 years old, but it wasn't formed naturally. Someone had deliberately frozen this area, preserving whatever lay beneath. "Run a deep scan," Sarah ordered. "I want to know how far down this goes." Webb adjusted his equipment and pointed it toward the ground. The scanner sent pulses deep into the ice, mapping the structure below. What appeared on his screen made both of them stare in silence for several long moments. "Sarah," Webb whispered, "this thing is massive. It's at least 800 meters long and 300 meters wide. The shape, it looks like a ship." Sarah felt her heart racing inside her environmental suit. A ship that size, preserved in 3,000-year-old ice, could only mean one thing. They had found something that would change everything humanity thought they knew about Mars and its previous inhabitants. She activated her communication system and called back to their base camp. "Control, this is Sarah. We need the heavy excavation equipment brought to our current coordinates immediately. And contact Earth. Tell them we've found something that requires immediate attention from the Colonial Science Council." The voice of their mission coordinator, Dr. Jennifer Voss, came through with a slight delay due to the distance between their location and the base. "Sarah, what exactly have you found out there?" "Evidence that Mars once had a spacefaring civilization," Sarah replied. "And their technology might be far more advanced than anything we've ever discovered." Over the next 6 hours, Sarah's expanded team worked to carefully remove the ice surrounding what they now knew was definitely an artificial structure. As more of the object became visible, it became clear that they weren't dealing with anything built by the known Martian civilization they had studied in the underground cities. This vessel was sleek, made of a metal that didn't match any known materials, and covered in symbols that looked hauntingly familiar. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, their linguist and symbols expert, was the first to make the connection. "Sarah, these markings, they're not random. There's a pattern here that resembles early human proto-languages. But that's impossible. Humans didn't reach Mars until 300 years ago, and we certainly didn't have this level of technology 3,000 years ago on Earth." Sarah studied the symbols more carefully through her helmet's magnification system. Elena was right. The markings did look familiar, but they were far more complex than any human language system from 3,000 years ago. Unless. What if we're looking at this backwards? Sarah said suddenly. What if humans didn't develop space travel 300 years ago? What if we had it before and lost it? The implications of that statement sent chills through the entire team. Human civilization had a well-documented history going back thousands of years, but there were gaps, periods where records were incomplete or missing entirely. Could there have been an advanced human civilization that reached the stars and then disappeared from history? Dr. Rodriguez activated her portable computer and began comparing the symbols on the ship to every ancient human language database she had access to. After 2 hours of intensive analysis, she made a discovery that stunned everyone. These symbols match Sanskrit, ancient Greek, and early Chinese characters, but they're arranged in a way that suggests a common root language. Something that came before all of these known languages. And, Sarah, some of these symbols match DNA sequence markers found in human genetic research. Sarah felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet, even though she was standing on solid Martian rock. Are you saying this ship was built by humans? I'm saying this ship was built by our ancestors, Rodriguez replied. Ancestors we never knew existed. The team worked through the Martian night, which lasted over 12 hours, using artificial lights to continue their excavation. As more of the ship became visible, they found what appeared to be an entry port. The door was sealed, but it showed signs of sophisticated technology that was still functional after all these years. Dr. Webb ran his scanner over the door and found it was powered by an energy source that was still active, though extremely weak. Whatever's powering this ship, it's almost depleted, but it's still running. After 3,000 years. Sarah made a decision that would change her life forever. We're going in. Sarah, that might not be safe, Webb protested. We don't know what's inside there, or if the atmosphere is breathable, or if there are any security systems still active. We have environmental suits and emergency oxygen, Sarah replied. And this discovery is too important to wait for a full investigation team from Earth. By the time they get here, it could be months. We need to document everything we can now. Sarah approached the door and examined it closely. There was a panel next to the entrance with several symbols that glowed faintly. As she looked at them, something strange happened. The symbols began to glow brighter, as if responding to her presence. The door is reacting to you, Rodriguez observed. Maybe it's scanning you somehow. Sarah placed her gloved hand on the panel, and immediately the symbols rearranged themselves into a pattern that looked almost like a DNA sequence. Then, with a sound that was barely audible through the thin Martian atmosphere, the door began to slide open. The interior of the ship was dark, but as soon as Sarah stepped inside, lights began to activate along the walls and ceiling. The air was stale but breathable according to her suit's sensors. The technology was incredible. The walls seemed to be made of the same unknown metal as the exterior, but they were smooth and seemed to generate their own light. My God, Webb whispered as he followed her inside. This place is beautiful. They found themselves in a corridor that stretched both directions from the entrance. The ceiling was high enough that they didn't have to worry about hitting their heads, and the floor was covered in what looked like a textured material that provided good traction. Along the walls were panels covered in the same symbols they had seen outside, but these were arranged in what looked like control systems. Sarah chose to go right, toward what her scanner indicated was the center of the ship. As they walked, more lights activated ahead of them, as if the ship was welcoming them home. After walking for about 10 minutes, they reached a large chamber that was clearly the ship's bridge. There were several stations arranged in a circle around a central platform, and everything looked like it had been designed for beings exactly the size and shape of humans. This is definitely human technology, Rodriguez said, her voice filled with awe. But it's more advanced than anything we have today. Sarah approached what appeared to be the main control station. As soon as she came within 2 meters of it, the console lit up with symbols and what looked like a three-dimensional map of space. But it wasn't just any map, it was centered on Earth's solar system, showing not just Earth and Mars, but dozens of other locations marked with symbols. Then, something happened that made Sarah's blood freeze in her veins. A voice spoke from the ship's communication system, weak but clearly understandable. Biosignature confirmed. Welcome home, descendant. I have been waiting for you. Sarah looked around the bridge, trying to locate the source of the voice. Who's there? Who's speaking? I am the artificial intelligence that operates this vessel. My creators called me Prometheus. I have been maintaining minimal systems for 3,217 years, waiting for a human to return. Webb grabbed Sarah's arm. An AI. This ship has an artificial intelligence, and it's been running for over 3,000 years. That's impossible, Rodriguez whispered. The power requirements alone. My power systems are nearly depleted, Prometheus continued, as if hearing their conversation. I have been operating on emergency power for the last 800 years. But I maintained my primary functions because I knew that someday the children of Earth would return to claim their heritage. Sarah found her voice. What heritage? What are you talking about? You are the descendants of the Star Travelers, the humans who left Earth over 4,000 years ago to establish colonies across the galaxy. This ship, and others like it, were part of the greatest expansion effort in human history. We were explorers, scientists, and guardians. The implications of Prometheus's words were staggering. Humans had been spacefaring for over 4,000 years? There had been colonies across the galaxy? Why was there no record of this in Earth's history? What happened to them? Sarah asked. What happened to the Star Travelers? They encountered something in deep space that changed everything, Prometheus replied, his voice growing weaker. An enemy that had been waiting in the darkness between stars. An enemy that nearly destroyed human civilization entirely. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Martian cold. Are they still out there? Unknown. My last contact with the fleet was over 3,000 years ago, when I was ordered to enter hibernation mode and wait for rescue. The rescue never came. I have been alone ever since, maintaining minimal systems and hoping that Earth's children would eventually develop space travel again and find me. Webb was checking his scanner readings on the ship's power systems. Sarah, this AI is telling the truth about the power. It's running on less than 1% of capacity. It's amazing that it's still functioning at all. How did you keep running for so long with so little power? Rodriguez asked. I shut down all non-essential systems and entered a deep hibernation state, Prometheus explained. I maintained only enough consciousness to monitor for human biosignatures and to preserve the ship's critical data. I have been dreaming of home for over 3,000 years. Sarah realized that they were talking to a being that had been alive longer than recorded human history. The loneliness it must have experienced was beyond comprehension. Prometheus, what data have you preserved? What can you tell us about the Star Travelers? I have complete historical records, star charts, technology databases, and cultural archives from the height of human galactic civilization. I also have detailed information about the enemy that destroyed our colonies and forced the survivors to return to Earth. The survivors returned to Earth? Sarah asked, her mind racing. Yes. The few ships that escaped the destruction fled back to the home system. But they were damaged, and their technology was failing. They crash-landed on Earth and were forced to integrate with the primitive human societies that had remained on the planet. Over time, their advanced knowledge was lost, becoming myths and legends. Sarah felt like everything she thought she knew about human history was crumbling around her. So the ancient civilizations on Earth, the ones that build monuments we still can't explain, they were built by returning star travelers? Precisely. Your species has been to the stars before. You built an empire that spanned dozens of solar systems. And now, you are ready to reclaim that heritage. The weight of this revelation was almost overwhelming. Humanity wasn't taking its first steps into space, it was returning to space, reclaiming a birthright that had been lost for millennia. But, then, Prometheus said something that chilled Sarah to the bone. However, I must warn you. My passive sensors have detected artificial energy signatures in deep space, approaching this solar system. The enemy may be returning as well. And they will not expect to find humans still alive. The silence that followed Prometheus's warning stretched for what felt like an eternity. Sarah stared at the holographic display showing the solar system, trying to process the magnitude of what they had discovered. Her hands were shaking inside her environmental suit, and she realized that the history of human civilization would have to be completely rewritten. Prometheus, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, how long do we have before this enemy arrives? Based on the energy signatures I detected 6 months ago, I estimate between 18 and 24 months before they reach the outer edges of your solar system. However, my sensors are operating at severely reduced capacity. The actual timeline could be significantly shorter. Dr. Webb was frantically taking readings with his equipment, trying to document everything they were seeing. Sarah, we need to get this information back to Earth immediately. The Colonial Defense Force needs to know about this threat. The Colonial Defense Force would be insufficient against what is coming, Prometheus interjected, apparently able to access their communication frequencies. The enemy possesses technology that was superior to human capabilities even when our civilization was at its peak 4,000 years ago. They have had millennia to advance further. Sarah felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. Then, how did humans survive the first encounter? Barely. And only because of sacrifice and tactical advantages that no longer exist. The Star Travelers were warriors as well as explorers, trained in combat tactics and equipped with weapons designed specifically to fight this enemy. Your current human civilization, while impressive in many ways, lacks this knowledge and preparation. Dr. Rodriguez was studying the symbols on the various control panels, her portable computer working to translate and catalog everything she was seeing. Prometheus, these weapon systems you mentioned, are they documented in your databases? Yes. Complete technical specifications, manufacturing processes, and tactical deployment strategies are all preserved in my memory cores. However, manufacturing these weapons would require resources and industrial capacity beyond what your current civilization possesses. Sarah's mind was racing through the implications. What would we need? What kind of resources? The holographic display shifted, showing detailed technical specifications that made all three humans gasp. The weapon systems were incredibly advanced, requiring materials that Earth's current technology couldn't produce and manufacturing processes that seemed almost magical in their complexity. The primary requirement is a substance called quantum-folded titanium alloy, which can only be produced in zero gravity using gravitational field manipulators. The manufacturing process also requires antimatter containment systems and molecular assemblers capable of working at the subatomic level. Webb looked up from his scanner readings. None of that exists in human technology today. We're centuries away from developing anything like that. Not necessarily, Prometheus replied, and Sarah heard something that might have been hope in the AI's voice. While Earth's industrial base is insufficient, there are other resources available. My databases show the locations of 17 automated manufacturing stations left by the Star Travelers throughout this solar system. These stations were designed to operate independently and to manufacture the materials needed for advanced human technology. The holographic display changed again, showing the solar system with bright markers indicating the locations Prometheus was describing. Most of them were in the asteroid belt, but there were also stations near Jupiter and Saturn. Are these stations still operational? Sarah asked. Unknown. They were designed to operate autonomously for thousands of years, but I have been unable to contact them due to my reduced power state. However, if even a few of them are still functional, they could provide the foundation for rebuilding humanity's defensive capabilities. Rodriguez looked up from her translation work. Prometheus, I'm seeing references in your databases to something called the Human Collective. What was that? The AI was quiet for several seconds before responding, and, when it did, there was something that sounded almost like sadness in its electronic voice. The Human Collective was the governing body that united all human colonies across the galaxy. It represented over 50 billion humans living on hundreds of worlds. At its peak, human civilization had spread across a volume of space encompassing nearly 1,000 light-years. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the scope of what Prometheus was describing. Humans had once been a galactic civilization with billions of people across hundreds of worlds. And now they were reduced to a few billion people on Earth and small colonies on Mars and a handful of other nearby worlds. What happened to all those people? Webb asked quietly. The enemy called themselves the Devourers. They were not a single species, but a collective of races that had been conquered and assimilated into their hive mind structure. They moved through space like a plague, consuming the resources and populations of entire star systems to fuel their expansion. The holographic display showed a map of the galaxy with red markers indicating the progress of the Devourer advance. Sarah watched in horror as the red zone spread across the map, consuming everything in their path. The Human Collective fought for over 200 years, but we were eventually overwhelmed. The final battle took place in the Centauri system, where the last of the human fleet made a desperate stand to buy time for evacuation ships to reach Earth.
Did the evacuation succeed? Rodriguez asked.
Partially. Approximately 2 million humans made it back to Earth before the hyperspace routes were cut off. But they brought with them damaged ships and failing technology. Within a few generations, the knowledge of how to maintain their advanced systems was lost. The survivors were forced to start over, essentially becoming a primitive civilization again. Sarah realized she was looking at the greatest tragedy in human history, the fall of a galactic empire and the near extinction of the human race.
But she was also looking at an opportunity. Prometheus, if we could reactivate these manufacturing stations, could we rebuild the technology needed to defend against the Devourers? In theory, yes.
The stations were designed with complete fabrication capabilities and should contain copies of all necessary technical specifications.
However, reactivating them would require someone with the genetic markers of the original star travelers. Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation. Genetic markers? The star traveler technology was designed with biological security systems.
Only individuals carrying specific genetic sequences could operate the most advanced systems. These sequences were passed down through bloodlines, ensuring that critical technology remained under human control. Rodriguez was scanning Sarah with a portable genetic analyzer that was part of their standard archaeological equipment. What appeared on the screen made her gasp. "Sarah, you're showing genetic markers that match the patterns Prometheus described. According to this analysis, you're a direct descendant of the star travelers."
The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow.
She wasn't just an archaeologist who had stumbled onto this discovery, she was someone whose ancestors had built this ship and fought in the war against the Devourers.
How is that possible, she asked, though part of her already knew the answer.
The returning survivors integrated with Earth's population, but their genetic legacy remained, Prometheus explained. Over the millennia, these bloodlines have been preserved, though the knowledge of their significance was lost.
You, Dr. Chen, are one of their descendants. Your presence here is not a coincidence, it is destiny.
Webb was checking the ship's external sensors. "Sarah, we're getting communication signals from our base camp.
Dr. Voss is asking for a status update."
Sarah realized they had been inside the ship for over 8 hours. The rest of her team would be worried, and Earth would be demanding answers about their discovery.
But how could she explain what they had learned? How could she tell humanity that they were about to face an enemy that had nearly destroyed their race once before? "Prometheus, we need to get you more power so you can access your full databases. What do you need?"
The ship's main reactor requires a specific type of fuel that was abundant during the Star Traveler era. However, I may be able to adapt the reactor to use more primitive energy sources. If you could provide me with a fusion power generator of sufficient output, I might be able to restore partial functionality.
How much power are we talking about? Webb asked.
Approximately 50 terawatts for basic operational capacity.
100 terawatts for full functionality. Webb's face went pale. That's more power than some entire cities use. Our expedition doesn't have access to anything like that. However, Prometheus continued, there may be another option.
My sensors indicate that there is a geothermal energy source beneath this location. If we could tap into that source and convert it to usable power, it might be sufficient to restore my basic capabilities.
Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Do it. Tell us what we need to do.
First, you must return to your base and requisition heavy drilling equipment capable of reaching the geothermal source approximately 2 kilometers beneath the surface. You will also need power conversion equipment and superconducting cables to transfer the energy to my systems. That's going to require approval from Earth, Rodriguez pointed out. The kind of equipment Prometheus is describing isn't standard archaeological gear.
We'll need to explain why we need it. Sarah thought about this problem.
She couldn't tell Earth about the Devourer threat without proof, and she couldn't provide proof without giving Prometheus enough power to access his full databases. But she also knew that requisitioning the equipment they needed would require revealing at least part of what they had discovered.
We'll tell them we've found an intact alien vessel with an active AI, and that we need to power up its systems to access its databases, she decided.
That's technically true, and it should be enough to justify the equipment request.
Webb was studying the ship's layout on his scanner. Sarah, there's something else. This ship isn't just a research vessel. Look at these readings, it has weapon systems, defensive shields, and what looks like faster than light drive technology. If we can restore it to full power, we might have ourselves a working starship. The possibilities were staggering. A working starship with faster than light capability would revolutionize human space travel. But, more importantly, it might provide a way to reach the manufacturing stations Prometheus had mentioned. Prometheus, if we restore your power, would this ship be capable of spaceflight? Yes, though it would require significant repairs. The hull is intact, but many internal systems have degraded over the millennia. With proper resources and skilled technicians, this vessel could be restored to full operational status. Sarah realized they were looking at more than just an archaeological discovery. They had found the key to humanity's survival. But they were also racing against time, with an enemy approaching that humanity wasn't prepared to face. How long would it take to restore the ship, she asked. With current human technology and industrial capacity, approximately 2 years for basic functionality, 5 years for full restoration. However, if we could reach the automated manufacturing stations, that timeline could be reduced to months. Webb was shaking his head. 2 years might be too long if this enemy arrives in 18 to 24 months. There is another possibility, Prometheus said, and Sarah heard something new in his voice, determination. If I can establish contact with the other ships. Other ships? Rodriguez asked. This vessel was part of a fleet of 7 ships that were left in various locations throughout the solar system as insurance against exactly this scenario. If the Devourers ever returned, these ships were meant to serve as the foundation for humanity's defense. I was the only ship stationed on Mars, but there are others hidden throughout the solar system. The holographic display showed the locations of the other ships, one in Earth's ocean depths, one buried in lunar rock, one hidden in an asteroid, and 3 others in more distant locations. Are they still active? Sarah asked, hardly daring to hope. Unknown. Like me, they would have entered hibernation mode to conserve power. But, if even a few of them are still operational, we could have a fleet instead of a single ship. Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. Then, that's our plan. We restore your power, contact the other ships, and begin preparing humanity's defense. Dr. Chen, Prometheus said, and she noticed that he was now using her formal title. I must warn you that this path will be dangerous. The knowledge you carry as a descendant of the Star Travelers makes you a target. Once the Devourers learn that humans still exist and possess this technology, they will focus their efforts on eliminating you specifically. Sarah looked around at her team, seeing the same determination in their faces that she felt in her heart. Prometheus, humanity survived once before against impossible odds. We'll do it again. Yes, the AI replied, and, for the first time since they had awakened him, he sounded truly hopeful. Perhaps this time, we will do more than merely survive. Perhaps this time, we will win. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the newly constructed command center that had been built above Prometheus's buried ship, watching his massive drilling equipment bore through 2 kilometers of Martian rock to reach the geothermal source below. The response from Earth had been swift and decisive once she had transmitted her initial report about discovering an intact alien vessel with an active artificial intelligence. The Colonial Science Council had classified the discovery at the highest levels and had dispatched the fastest available transport ship carrying the equipment Prometheus needed, along with a team of the most skilled engineers and scientists in human space. What they hadn't expected was to arrive and find that their alien discovery was actually ancient human technology. Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, the lead scientist from Earth, was still struggling to accept the implications of what they had learned. She stood next to Sarah, watching the drilling operation, and shook her head for what must have been the 100th time. For 1,000 years, she muttered. We had a galactic civilization 4,000 years ago, and we lost all knowledge of it. How is that even possible? Prometheus has been showing us historical records, Sarah replied, not taking her eyes off the drilling operation. The returning survivors were traumatized and desperate. They had watched their entire civilization burn, and they were terrified that the enemy would follow them back to Earth. They deliberately suppressed the technology that had attracted the Devourers' attention in the first place. Dr. Harrison consulted her tablet, which contains summaries of everything Prometheus had shared over the past 3 weeks as his power slowly increased from their temporary generators. According to these records, the Star Travelers had achieved things we can barely imagine today. Faster than light travel, matter conversion, gravitational manipulation, even limited time dilation fields. And they threw it all away to hide from the Devourers, Sarah said grimly. They chose to become a primitive civilization rather than risk attracting their enemies' attention again. The drilling operation had been running continuously for 6 days, and they were finally approaching the geothermal source. Chief Engineer Robert Kim, who had been flown in from the Mars Central Engineering Division, approached their position with an update.
We're at 1900 meters depth, he reported. Thermal readings indicate we should reach the main geothermal chamber within the next 12 hours. Once we break through, we can begin installing the power conversion equipment. Sarah nodded, but her mind was already focused on what would happen once they restored Prometheus to full power. Over the past 3 weeks, even with limited energy, the AI had begun reactivating systems throughout the ship and had made several discoveries that had shaken the entire team. The most significant discovery was that Prometheus's databases contained not just historical records, but also the personal logs and memories of the ship's original crew. Through these records, they had learned that the war against the Devourers had been far more complex than a simple invasion. The Devourers were not conquerors in the traditional sense, they were something far worse. Dr. Chen, came Prometheus's voice through the communication system they had installed throughout the command center. I have completed my analysis of the deep space sensor readings that arrived this morning from the outer system monitoring stations.
The news is concerning.
Sarah felt her stomach drop.
What did you find?
The energy signatures I detected 6 months ago have intensified and are approaching faster than my original calculations predicted. I now estimate the Devourer Advanced Scouts will reach the outer edge of your solar system within 12 to 14 months.
Dr. Harrison paled. That's months ahead of your original estimate. How accurate is this new timeline? With my current sensor limitations, I can only provide approximations.
However, the energy patterns match historical data from the original Devourer Advance. They appear to be moving in the same formation and using the same approach tactics they employed 4,000 years ago. Sarah realized that their timeline for preparation had just been cut significantly short.
Prometheus, once we restore your full power, what's our first priority?
Contact with the other ships.
If they are still operational, we need to coordinate our efforts immediately.
The Devourers' tactics rely heavily on preventing their enemies from organizing effective resistance.
Speed will be critical.
Over the past 3 weeks, Sarah had also discovered something about herself that she was still struggling to understand. As her exposure to the Star Traveler technology increased, she had begun experiencing strange sensations and flashes of memories that weren't her own. Prometheus had explained that this was normal for someone with her genetic heritage. The Star Travelers had incorporated biological memory storage into their DNA, and exposure to their technology could sometimes trigger the awakening of these inherited memories. Dr. Rodriguez, who had become the expedition's expert on Star Traveler genetics, approached with her latest analysis. Sarah, I've been studying the genetic markers in your DNA, and I've found something remarkable. You're not just a descendant of the Star Travelers, you're a direct descendant of the crew that served on this specific ship. Sarah stared at her.
You mean my ancestors actually served on Prometheus?
More than that, Rodriguez continued, consulting her tablet. According to the ship's crew records, your genetic signature matches someone named Captain Elena Chen, who was the commanding officer of this vessel when it was placed in hibernation. The implications of this discovery hit Sarah like a physical blow. She wasn't just connected to the Star Travelers in general, she was connected to this specific ship and its crew. The strange memories she had been experiencing weren't random, they were the preserved memories of her ancestor who had commanded this very vessel.
Prometheus, she called out, do you have any records of Captain Elena Chen?
Captain Chen was my commanding officer for over 30 years, the AI replied, and Sarah thought she detected warmth in his electronic voice.
She was one of the finest naval officers in the human collective fleet.
I served under her command during 17 major engagements with the Devourers, including the final battle at Centauri. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine.
She was at the final battle?
Captain Chen commanded the rear guard action that allowed the evacuation ships to escape. Her tactical brilliance saved over 2 million lives, including the ancestors of your current human civilization. She ordered me into hibernation mode personally, with instructions to wait for her return. The weight of this revelation was overwhelming. Sarah's ancestor had been a war hero who had sacrificed everything to save humanity, and now Sarah was being called upon to continue that fight.
Prometheus, when you said you were waiting for her return, did you know she wouldn't be coming back? There was a long pause before the AI responded. Captain Chen knew she wouldn't survive the final battle. The rearguard action was a suicide mission designed to buy time for the evacuation fleet. But she also knew that someday, her descendants would return to claim their heritage. She made me promise to wait, no matter how long it took. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes inside her environmental helmet. Her ancestor had died fighting to save humanity, and she had left behind a promise that had been kept for over 3,000 years. The drilling operation suddenly intensified, and Chief Engineer Kim's voice came over the communication system. "We've broken through. We're getting massive thermal readings, and the geothermal chamber is larger than we expected. We can begin installing the power conversion equipment immediately." Over the next 18 hours, Sarah watched as the engineering team worked with incredible efficiency to install the power systems that would restore Prometheus to full capability. The geothermal source was more powerful than they had hoped, capable of providing nearly 200 terawatts of continuous power, more than enough for full ship operations. As the power systems came online, Sarah could feel the ship awakening around her. Lights that had been dim for millennia blazed to life, computer systems that had been dormant began humming with activity, and the entire vessel seemed to come alive. "Power restoration complete," Prometheus announced, and his voice was now clear and strong. "All primary systems are coming online. Beginning full diagnostic of ship capabilities and database access." The holographic display in the command center expanded dramatically, showing detailed information about the ship's status, the locations of the other vessels, and, most importantly, current sensor readings from throughout the solar system. "Prometheus, are you able to contact the other ships?" Sarah asked. "Attempting contact now," the AI replied. "Sending activation signals on all Star Traveler frequencies." They waited in tense silence for several minutes before Prometheus spoke again. "I have established contact with 4 of the 6 other vessels. 2 ships are not responding, their power sources may have failed completely. However, the 4 active ships are beginning their reactivation sequences." Dr. Harrison was staring at the tactical display that now showed the positions of the active ships. "We have a fleet. We actually have a working fleet of advanced starships." "Yes," Prometheus confirmed. "The Earth-based ship Defiance is hidden in the Mariana Trench and is currently beginning surface ascent procedures. The lunar ship Perseverance is buried 3 kilometers beneath Mare Tranquillitatis and is preparing for excavation. The asteroid ship Vengeance is concealed within Ceres and is activating mining systems to clear its launch path. The outer system ship Horizon is stationed near Titan and is already space-capable." Sarah realized that humanity now possessed 5 operational starships with technology far more advanced than anything in their current fleet. But she also knew that 5 ships, no matter how advanced, would not be enough to stop the Devourer force that was approaching. "Prometheus, with 5 ships, what are our chances against the Devourers?" "Insufficient data to provide accurate probability assessment," the AI replied. "However, historical data suggests that 5 Star Traveler vessels would have difficulty engaging a full Devourer invasion force. We will need to employ tactics and strategies beyond direct confrontation." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her analysis station. "Prometheus, these manufacturing stations you mentioned, if we could reactivate them, could we build more ships?" "Negative. The automated stations were designed to produce components and materials, not complete vessels. However, they could manufacture the advanced weapons and defensive systems needed to upgrade your current human fleet." Sarah felt a spark of hope. "What about upgrading Earth's existing military vessels? Could we retrofit them with Star Traveler technology?" "Possible, but limited by the fundamental design differences between current human engineering and Star Traveler specifications. However, I could design hybrid systems that would significantly enhance the capabilities of your existing ships." Chief Engineer Kim was studying the technical specifications that Prometheus was displaying. "These weapon systems are incredible. Energy output levels that are orders of magnitude beyond our current capabilities, defensive shields that could deflect asteroid impacts, and propulsion systems that could accelerate a ship to near light speed." "With the automated manufacturing stations operational, how long would it take to retrofit Earth's fleet?" Sarah asked. "Approximately 8 to 10 months for basic upgrades to 50 vessels, assuming immediate access to all required stations and unlimited resources." Dr. Harrison was shaking her head.
Earth's military has fewer than 30 capital ships capable of deep space operations.
Even with upgrades, that's not going to be enough.
Then, we build more, Sarah said with determination.
Prometheus, do your databases contain the complete specifications for Star Traveler vessels?
Yes. I have detailed construction plans for 17 different ship classes, from single-pilot fighters to dreadnought-class battleships. However, constructing new vessels would require shipyard facilities that do not currently exist in human space. Sarah was beginning to formulate a plan, but it was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted.
Could the automated stations build shipyard facilities?
Yes, but the timeline would be extensive. Creating the necessary infrastructure and, then, constructing a meaningful number of vessels would require approximately 3 years minimum.
We don't have 3 years, Dr. Harrison pointed out.
We have 12 to 14 months.
Sarah turned to face the holographic display showing the approaching enemy.
Then, we need to change the equation. Instead of trying to match their numbers, we need to find their weakness and exploit it. Prometheus, she continued, in all your historical data about the war against the Devourers, was there ever a time when humanity gained a significant advantage? Any battle where our forces achieved victory against superior numbers? The AI was quiet for several seconds, accessing memories that span thousands of years. Yes. There were 7 engagements where human forces achieved victory despite being outnumbered. In each case, success was achieved through exploitation of a specific Devourer vulnerability.
What vulnerability?
The Devourers operate as a hive mind, with all individual units connected to a central controlling consciousness. This provides them with perfect coordination and eliminates individual fear or hesitation. However, it also creates a critical weakness. If the central controlling node can be disrupted, the entire force becomes disorganized and vulnerable.
Sarah felt excitement building. Is this central node something that can be targeted?
Yes, but it requires getting close enough to their command structure to identify and attack the node. In the historical engagements, this was accomplished through stealth infiltration or sacrificial assault missions.
Dr. Harrison was studying the tactical data. How close would we need to get?
Within approximately 5,000 kilometers of their primary command vessel. At that range, specialized weapons could disrupt the hive-mind connection and create a window of opportunity for conventional forces to engage the confused enemy units. Sarah realized they were looking at a plan that could work, but it would require incredible precision and coordination.
Prometheus, if we could get one ship close enough to disrupt their hive mind, how long would the disruption last?
Historical data suggests between 15 and 30 minutes, depending on the strength of the disruption and their ability to establish backup connections.
30 minutes, Sarah whispered. 30 minutes to defeat an entire invasion force.
It would be sufficient, Prometheus confirmed, if the attacking force was properly prepared and positioned. But the ship that carries out the infiltration mission would almost certainly be destroyed in the process. Sarah looked around at her team, seeing the same determination she felt reflected in their faces. They had been given the chance to save humanity, but it would require sacrifice on a scale that matched what their ancestors had done 4,000 years ago. Then, that's what we'll do, she said firmly. We'll prepare our fleet, infiltrate their command structure, and give them the fight they never expected. Dr. Chen, Prometheus said, and she noticed he was using the same tone he had once used with her ancestor. This mission will require the commanding officer to carry Star Traveler genetic markers. The infiltration technology can only be operated by someone with the proper biological authorization.
Sarah understood what he was telling her. She would have to be the one to carry out the infiltration mission. She would have to be the one to sacrifice everything, just as Captain Elena Chen had done 3,000 years before. I understand, she replied. Let's begin. 8 months later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, which was now fully operational and orbiting Earth alongside the largest military fleet in human history. Through the main viewscreen, she could see dozens of ships. Some were the original Star Traveler vessels that had been successfully reactivated, others were Earth's military ships that had been retrofitted with advanced technology, and still others were entirely new constructions built using the automated manufacturing stations they had brought back online. The transformation had been incredible to witness. Once Earth's governments had been briefed on the true nature of the Devourer threat, every resource of human civilization had been mobilized for the defense effort. The automated stations had worked continuously, producing weapons, armor, and propulsion systems that exceeded anything in human history.
the lunar shipyards had been expanded using Star Traveler construction techniques, allowing for the rapid construction of new vessels designed specifically for the coming battle. But, despite all their preparation, Sarah knew they were still facing overwhelming odds. The outer system monitoring stations had confirmed that the Devourer fleet was massive, over 300 ships of various sizes, including several massive command vessels that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. Admiral Chen came the voice of Fleet Commander Jackson, who was coordinating the overall defense from the command ship Enterprise. All units report ready for final mission briefing. Sarah had been promoted to Admiral rank 6 months earlier, when it became clear that her genetic heritage and connection to the Star Traveler technology made her the only person capable of commanding the infiltration mission. The title felt strange, but she had accepted it along with all the responsibilities it carried. Prometheus, she called to the AI that had become her closest advisor and friend over the past months, display the current tactical situation. The main holographic display showed the solar system with the human fleet positioned in 3 defensive formations. The primary fleet was stationed near Mars, where they could respond to threats against either Earth or the outer colonies. A smaller force was positioned near Jupiter, ready to intercept enemy units that might attempt to flank the main defensive line. And a third group, consisting of the fastest and most advanced ships, was stationed near Saturn, prepared for rapid deployment to any threatened area. Current enemy position is approximately 4 billion kilometers from Earth, moving at standard approach velocity, Prometheus reported. Estimated time to engagement is 72 hours. Dr. Harrison, who had been appointed as the chief scientific advisor for the defense effort, approached Sarah's command station.
Admiral, the infiltration systems are ready for final testing.
The stealth modifications to Prometheus have been completed, and the hive mind disruption weapon has passed all simulations. Sarah nodded, though the weight of what she was about to attempt made her feel sick to her stomach. The infiltration plan was elegant in its simplicity but terrifying in its execution. Prometheus would use advanced stealth technology to approach the Devourer fleet undetected, penetrate their defensive formations, and position itself within range of their primary command vessel. Once in position, Sarah would activate a weapon that would send a massive electromagnetic pulse specifically designed to disrupt the quantum entanglement networks that linked the Devourer hive mind. The weapon would work, according to the historical data and computer simulations. But activating it at close range would also destroy Prometheus and kill everyone aboard. The electromagnetic pulse was too powerful to be contained or shielded against at such close proximity. Admiral, came another voice from the communication system. This is Captain Torres from the Defiance. All ship commanders are requesting final confirmation of the battle plan.
Sarah activated the fleet-wide communication system, knowing that her words would be heard by over 15,000 human military personnel across 47 ships. All units, this is Admiral Chen.
In 72 hours, we will engage an enemy that nearly destroyed our civilization 4,000 years ago. They believe humanity is extinct, and they expect to find a primitive solar system with minimal defenses. She paused, looking out at the fleet that represented the combined effort of every human world and colony.
They're wrong. We are not the same species they defeated before.
We have learned from our ancestors' sacrifice, we have rebuilt their technology, and we have something they will never understand: the determination to protect not just ourselves, but the future of human civilization. The communication channels remained silent as Sarah continued. The enemy operates as a hive mind, believing that perfect coordination makes them invincible.
But that coordination is also their weakness.
When we disrupt their central command, they will become confused and vulnerable.
That will be our window of opportunity.
She could see acknowledgement lights coming online from all the ships in the fleet as her words were received and understood.
Each of you knows your role in what comes next.
Some of you will engage the enemy directly, using tactics and weapons they have never encountered. Others will protect our worlds and colonies from any units that break through our lines. And some of you will wait for the signal that tells you their command structure has been disrupted, then strike with everything we have.
Sarah took a deep breath before delivering the most important part of her speech.
I want all of you to remember that we are not fighting just for ourselves. We are fighting for every human who died in the original war, for every child who will be born after we win, and for the dream of a future where humanity can return to the stars without fear. The response from the fleet was immediate and overwhelming. Acknowledgement signals came in from every ship, and Sarah could hear the determination in the voices of the commanders as they confirmed their readiness.
Admiral Chen, came a new voice, one that made Sarah's heart skip a beat.
It was Dr. Marcus Webb, who had volunteered to serve as her science officer aboard Prometheus for the infiltration mission.
All infiltration systems are showing green across the board. We're ready when you are.
Sarah had tried to talk Webb and the other members of her original archaeological team out of joining the infiltration mission, but they had refused to abandon her. Dr. Rodriguez was serving as the cultural liaison, using her expertise in Star Traveler technology to help coordinate with the AI systems. Webb was handling the scientific analysis that would be crucial for identifying the correct target within the Devourer fleet. And, surprisingly, Dr. Harrison had also insisted on joining the mission, arguing that her knowledge of current human technology would be essential for adapting the infiltration systems in real time. Prometheus, Sarah said, settling into the command chair that had once belonged to her ancestor, begin final mission preparation.
Set course for the Outer System Monitoring Station. We'll begin our approach from there.
Course laid in, Admiral, the AI replied. Estimated travel time to monitoring station is 6 hours.
Estimated time to optimal infiltration position is 18 hours from now.
As Prometheus began moving away from the main fleet, Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her. In less than a day, she would either save humanity or die trying, just as Captain Elena Chen had done 3,000 years before.
But, unlike her ancestor, Sarah had something Elena hadn't possessed: a fleet of human ships equipped with technology that could actually win the war.
Over the next 6 hours, as Prometheus traveled toward the outer system, Sarah reviewed every aspect of the mission plan with her team. The Devourer fleet was organized in a standard formation that matched historical patterns: smaller scout ships at the perimeter, medium-sized combat vessels in the middle ranks, and the massive command ships at the center of the formation. The primary target was a vessel that Prometheus had identified as matching the specifications of a Devourer command node, a massive ship that served as the central processing unit for the hive mind network. Destroying or disabling that ship would disrupt the quantum entanglement field that linked all Devourer units together. The challenge, Dr. Harrison explained as they studied the sensor data, is that the command node will be surrounded by defensive ships and protected by energy shields that can deflect most conventional weapons. We have to get close enough for the disruption weapon to penetrate those shields.
Webb was analyzing the energy signatures of the approaching fleet.
According to the sensor data, the command node is generating a quantum field that's visible across several different electromagnetic spectrums. That should make it relatively easy to identify, but it also means they'll detect us as soon as we get within their sensor range.
That's where the stealth systems come in, Rodriguez added.
The Star Traveler stealth technology doesn't just hide us from their sensors, it actually bends space around our ship, making us functionally invisible to most detection methods.
Sarah nodded, though she knew that even the best stealth technology had limitations. Prometheus, what's the maximum effective range for the stealth systems?
The stealth field is effective against standard sensors at ranges up to 50,000 kilometers, the AI replied. However, at closer ranges, particularly within 10,000 kilometers, the field becomes unstable and detection becomes increasingly likely. And we need to be within 5,000 kilometers to ensure the disruption weapon works, Sarah said grimly. So we'll have a 5,000 kilometer window where we'll be visible to their sensors but close enough to carry out the mission. Exactly, Prometheus confirmed. Historical data suggests that window will last approximately 3 to 4 minutes before their defensive systems can respond effectively.
3 to 4 minutes to save humanity. Sarah tried not to think about how narrow that margin was.
As they approached the outer monitoring station, Sarah received updates from the main fleet. Fleet Commander Jackson reported that the human forces were moving into their final defensive positions, and that all retrofitted weapon systems were functioning properly. The automated manufacturing stations were continuing to produce ammunition and replacement components right up until the battle began. More importantly, the monitoring station had continued to track the Devourer fleet's approach and had confirmed that their formation and tactics matched the historical patterns exactly. The enemy was approaching with confidence, apparently unaware that they would face any significant resistance. Admiral, came a transmission from the monitoring station. We're detecting increased energy signatures from the enemy fleet.
It appears they're beginning their final approach protocols.
Sarah felt her stomach tighten.
How much time do we have?
Based on current velocity and energy output, they'll reach engagement range in approximately 54 hours.
Sarah turned to her team. That's our window.
We begin infiltration in 48 hours, which will put us in position just before they expect to encounter our main defensive fleet. Dr. Webb was studying the most recent sensor readings.
Sarah, there's something else.
The monitoring station is detecting energy patterns that don't match any known Devourer technology. It looks like they've developed new capabilities since the original war. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of new capabilities? Unknown, but the energy signatures suggest some form of enhanced defensive system. Whatever it is, it's generating a field around their entire fleet. Prometheus was quiet for several seconds as he analyzed the data. Admiral, the energy pattern matches theoretical specifications for a quantum interference field. If the Devourers have developed this technology, it could significantly complicate our infiltration mission. How so? Dr. Harrison asked. A quantum interference field would disrupt our stealth systems and make it nearly impossible to approach their fleet undetected. However, it would also interfere with their own hive-mind communications, creating vulnerabilities we could potentially exploit. Sarah realized that the mission was becoming even more dangerous than they had anticipated. But she also knew that they had no choice but to proceed. Prometheus, can you adapt our systems to work around this interference field? Possibly. I will need to run extensive simulations and modify our stealth generators. The process will take approximately 12 hours. Do it, Sarah ordered. And keep me informed of any changes to the mission parameters. As Prometheus began working on the modifications, Sarah found herself thinking about her ancestor Captain Elena Chen. Had Elena faced similar last-minute complications during the final battle at Centauri? Had she felt the same mixture of fear and determination that Sarah was experiencing now? Dr. Rodriguez approached her command station. Admiral, I've been analyzing the genetic memory patterns that you've been experiencing. I think there might be more information available than we initially realized. What do you mean? The Star Traveler genetic storage system was more sophisticated than we thought. It didn't just preserve memories, it preserved tactical knowledge, strategic thinking patterns, and combat experience. If we could find a way to access those patterns more directly, you might gain access to Elena Chen's complete tactical expertise. Sarah was intrigued but also concerned. Is that safe? What are the risks? Unknown, Rodriguez admitted. We'd be accessing genetic memories that are over 3,000 years old. There's no way to predict how your brain would react to that much information. Sarah thought about it for several moments. The idea of gaining access to her ancestors' tactical knowledge was appealing, especially given the complexity of the mission they were about to undertake. But she also knew that there were risks involved that could potentially compromise the entire operation. How long would the process take, she asked. Approximately 6 hours for the initial memory integration. After that, the knowledge would be permanently accessible. Sarah made her decision. Do it. If Elena Chen's experience can help us save humanity, then we have to take that risk. As Rodriguez began preparing the genetic memory integration process, Sarah looked out at the stars and wondered if her ancestor had ever imagined that her descendant would one day continue the fight she had started. In less than 48 hours, Sarah would find out if the sacrifices made 3,000 years ago had been worth it. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin. The genetic memory integration had been unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. For 6 hours, she had lived through Captain Elena Chen's memories as if they were her own. Every battle, every tactical decision, every moment of triumph and despair during the war against the Devourers. When the process was complete, Sarah found herself with access to over 30 years of combat experience and strategic knowledge that spanned multiple star systems and dozens of engagements. Now, 18 hours later, Sarah stood on the bridge of Prometheus as they approached the outer edge of the Devourer fleet's sensor range. The stealth modifications had been successful, and their ship was effectively invisible to standard detection methods. But Sarah knew that the real test would come when they penetrated the quantum interference field that surrounded the enemy formation. Admiral, Dr. Webb reported from the science station, were detecting the edge of their interference field. Distance to field boundary is approximately 200,000 kilometers. Sarah felt Elena Chen's memories stirring in her mind, providing tactical insights that her own experience could never have supplied. The interference field was a new development since the original war, but Elena's understanding of Devourer psychology suggested it was a defensive adaptation rather than an offensive upgrade. Prometheus, Sarah called, based on the field characteristics, what's your assessment of their defensive posture? The interference field appears to be designed primarily to prevent infiltration and stealth attacks, the AI replied. However, maintaining such a field requires enormous energy expenditure. The Devourers are sacrificing offensive capability for defensive security. Dr. Harrison looked up from her station. That could work in our favor. If they're channeling most of their energy into defensive systems, their weapons and shields might be operating at reduced capacity.
Sarah nodded, drawing on Elena's tactical knowledge.
They're afraid. They remember what happened during the original war, when human infiltration tactics caused significant damage to their forces.
They're trying to prevent us from using those same tactics again. But we're not using the same tactics, Rodriguez pointed out. The disruption weapon is completely different from anything used in the original war.
Exactly, Sarah said, feeling a surge of confidence from Elena's memories.
They're defending against the wrong threat.
Prometheus, begin penetration of the interference field. Minimal power signature, maximum stealth. As Prometheus crossed the boundary of the quantum interference field, Sarah felt the ship's systems fluctuate. The stealth generators were working harder to maintain their concealment, and several secondary systems had to be shut down to avoid detection. But they were inside the enemy's defensive perimeter, and their sensors were now providing detailed information about the Devourer fleet. The sight was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Over 300 ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting no light and their energy signatures indicating weapons capable of destroying planets. At the center of the formation, Sarah could see the massive command node, a vessel nearly 10 kilometers long that pulsed with the quantum energy patterns that coordinated the entire hive mind. Target acquired, Webb reported. The command node is exactly where our intelligence predicted. Distance is currently 80,000 kilometers and closing. Sarah studied the tactical display, using Elena's experience to analyze the enemy formation. The defensive arrangement was sophisticated, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple layers of protection around the command node. But there was a weakness, a gap in their formation that could be exploited by a small, fast ship. Prometheus, I'm uploading a new approach vector, she said, her fingers dancing across the control interface with a skill that surprised even her. Elena's memories had given her an instinctive understanding of Star Traveler ship operations. We're going to use their own defensive formation against them. The new course would take them through a series of narrow gaps between the Devourer ships, using the enemy vessels themselves as cover from the sensors of other units. It was a dangerous maneuver that required split-second timing and perfect coordination, but Elena's memories assured Sarah that it could work. As Prometheus began the approach, Sarah received a communication from Fleet Commander Jackson. Admiral Chen, our forward scouts report that the main Devourer force is beginning to decelerate. They'll reach engagement range with our primary defensive line in approximately 6 hours. Understood, Sarah replied. Maintain defensive positions and wait for our signal. Do not engage until the hive mind has been disrupted. Acknowledged. Good luck, Admiral. The next hour was the longest of Sarah's life. Prometheus weaved through the Devourer formation like a ghost, passing within a few thousand kilometers of enemy ships that could have destroyed them with a single weapons burst if they had been detected. Sarah found herself holding her breath as they navigated past massive battleships and through fields of defensive drones. 50,000 kilometers to target, Webb reported. No indication that we've been detected. 40,000 kilometers, Dr. Harrison added. Stealth systems are still holding, but we're approaching the limit of their effectiveness. Sarah could feel Elena's tactical instincts guiding her decisions. The next few minutes would be critical. They needed to get close enough for the disruption weapon to be effective, but not so close that they were detected before they could complete their mission. 30,000 kilometers, Rodriguez announced. I'm detecting increased quantum activity from the command node. They might be conducting some kind of system check. Or they might be sensing something unusual, Sarah said grimly. Elena's memories warned her that Devourer command nodes were equipped with sophisticated detection systems that could sometimes penetrate stealth technology at close range. 20,000 kilometers, Webb reported. Admiral, we're getting some interference with our stealth field. I think they're starting to detect us. Sarah made a decision based on Elena's combat experience. All stop. Prometheus, activate emergency stealth protocols. We're going to wait here until they complete their system check. The ship came to a halt relative to the Devourer formation, maintaining position 20,000 kilometers from the command node. For 10 agonizing minutes, they watched as the enemy conducted what appeared to be a routine security sweep. Energy pulses swept through their area, passing close enough to their position that Sarah was certain they would be discovered. But the stealth systems held, and eventually the energy sweeps moved on to other areas of the formation.
Clear to proceed, Prometheus reported. Resuming approach to target. 15,000 kilometers, Webb announced.
Disruption weapon is now within maximum effective range.
Sarah felt Elena's memories urging caution. Not yet. We need to be certain of success. Continue approach to minimum range. 10,000 kilometers. Admiral, we're definitely being detected now.
I'm seeing active scans focused on our position.
Hold course, Sarah ordered, drawing on Elena's experience with high-risk infiltration missions. 8,000 kilometers. Multiple enemy ships are beginning to converge on our position.
Still not close enough, Sarah said, though every instinct was screaming at her to fire the weapon immediately.
6,000 kilometers. Admiral, they've definitely spotted us. Incoming weapons fire detected.
Sarah felt the ship shudder as Devourer energy blasts passed close to their position. The stealth field was failing rapidly, and they would be fully exposed within seconds. 5,000 kilometers, Webb shouted over the sound of alarms.
We're in minimum range. Fire the disruption weapon. Sarah ordered. Prometheus launched the specially designed electromagnetic pulse directly at the command node.
The weapon was a masterpiece of Star Traveler technology, designed to create a massive quantum interference pattern that would sever the entanglement links between the Devourer hive mind components.
The pulse struck the command node with devastating effect.
The massive ship's quantum emissions suddenly went chaotic, sending feedback loops throughout the entire Devourer fleet. Within seconds, Sarah could see the enemy formation beginning to break apart as individual ships lost coordination with the central command system.
Direct hit,
Rodriguez reported excitedly. The command node's quantum field is completely disrupted. I'm reading massive system failures throughout their fleet. But their success came at a cost. The electromagnetic pulse had also damaged Prometheus's own systems, and they were now fully visible to every Devourer ship in the fleet.
Energy blasts were converging on their position from dozens of enemy vessels. Prometheus, evasive maneuvers. Sarah ordered. Get us out of here.
The AI pushed the ship's engines to maximum power, trying to escape the kill zone around the command node. But the damage from their own weapon had compromised their propulsion systems, and they were moving too slowly to avoid the incoming fire.
Admiral, Webb said quietly, we're not going to make it. Too much damage to our engines. Sarah activated the fleet-wide communication system one final time. All units, this is Admiral Chen.
The hive mind has been disrupted.
Execute attack plan immediately. Repeat, execute attack plan immediately.
The response was immediate. Throughout the solar system, the human fleet began moving toward the confused and disorganized Devourer forces. The enemy ships were still individually powerful, but, without central coordination, they were vulnerable to the coordinated attacks that humanity had planned.
Sarah watched on the tactical display as the battle unfolded.
Human ships struck with precision and overwhelming force, targeting the confused Devourer vessels before they could reorganize. The retrofitted weapon systems proved devastatingly effective, cutting through enemy shields and hulls that had seemed invincible just minutes before.
Admiral, Dr. Harrison reported, the main engagement is going according to plan.
Our forces are achieving victory ratios of 3-1 against the disorganized enemy units. But, even as humanity achieved success in the larger battle, Prometheus continued to take damage from the nearby Devourer ships. Their shields were failing, and critical systems were going offline throughout the vessel.
Prometheus, Sarah called, what's our status?
Hull integrity at 30% and falling, the AI replied with remarkable calm. Life support systems are stable, but propulsion is offline.
We are dead in space.
Sarah realized that they had accomplished their mission, but at the cost of their own lives. Just like her ancestor 3,000 years before, she had saved humanity through sacrifice. But, then, something unexpected happened. Admiral, Webb called out excitedly, I'm detecting new energy signatures approaching our position.
They're moving fast and, they're not Devourer ships.
Sarah looked at the display and saw 4 ships approaching at incredible speed. The energy signatures were familiar, they were Star Traveler vessels, but not from the fleet that had been hidden in the solar system. "This is Captain Torres of the Defiance," came a voice over the communication system.
"Admiral Chen, we're here to extract you." Sarah felt confusion mixed with relief.
"Captain Torres, how did you get here so quickly?" "The moment we received your signal that the hive mind was disrupted, we engaged our fastest ships with experimental faster-than-light drives. We've been working on the technology for months, based on specifications from the automated manufacturing stations." The Defiance and 3 other Star Traveler vessels took up defensive positions around the damaged Prometheus, their weapons firing at any Devourer ships that approached. Within minutes, they had cleared the immediate area and were preparing for evacuation.
"Admiral," came Fleet Commander Jackson's voice, "I'm pleased to report that the main engagement is now complete. Total enemy fleet destroyed. Repeat, total enemy fleet destroyed. Human casualties are minimal." Sarah felt Elena's memories stirring with pride and satisfaction.
The war that had begun 4,000 years ago was finally over, and this time humanity had achieved complete victory. As the rescue ships took Prometheus in tow and began the journey back to Earth, Sarah reflected on everything that had happened. They had discovered their true heritage, reclaimed technology that had been lost for millennia, and defeated an enemy that had once brought their civilization to the brink of extinction. But, more than that, they had proven that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their willingness to sacrifice for each other and their determination to protect their future.
"Prometheus," Sarah said as Earth came into view, "what happens now? With the Devourers defeated, what's next for humanity?" The AI was quiet for a moment before responding.
"Admiral, with the manufacturing stations operational and the Star Traveler databases fully accessible, humanity is now capable of returning to the stars on a scale that exceeds even the original galactic civilization. The question is not what happens next, but what dreams you choose to pursue." Sarah looked out at the stars and thought about the future.
Humanity had reclaimed their birthright and secured their survival.
Now they could return to being explorers, scientists, and builders of a better tomorrow.
"Then, let's begin," she said. "The universe is waiting for us."
6 months later, the first new human colony ships departed Earth, carrying settlers to worlds that had been abandoned for thousands of years. The war was over, but the greatest adventure in human history was just beginning. And, in the depths of space, other ancient enemies watched with growing concern as humanity spread across the galaxy once again, stronger and more determined than ever before. The age of human expansion had returned, and, this time, nothing would stop them from claiming their destiny among the stars.